Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Desk Drop. So this week I'm super pumped to announce that I've got Michael Hansen, who's the co-founder of Genie. Michael, nice to see you again, mate. How's everything going?
Yeah, everything's going very well. Apparently, there's a vaccine now that's going to get rolled out in the UK, so I'm quite positive about 20. I think 2021 is going to be the summer of love, so I'm feeling positive today.
Oh, mate, that's great news, isn't it? Let's hope so. Yeah, super pumped about that. I don't think I'm going to get my hands on it straight away, sadly, because I don't think I do anything important enough. But let's hope we get our hands on it soon. Cool, man. So look, thanks for joining me today. Just for everyone listening and watching, tell us a bit more about your business.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'd give you a quick story about why I created the business, because everything starts with a pain. So I actually worked in the world of outsourced sales. So essentially worked for a company called CloudTask that does outsourced business development. And I noticed that typically SDRs, not just at CloudTask, but at companies generally, are like green or graduate roles straight out of college. And they need a lot of help, both with process and then with good outbound messaging. And typically when companies used to outsource to CloudTask, my old company, they didn't have good messaging in place or good processes, they would fail, versus the opposite. When companies did have very good messaging and processes in place, they would succeed. So essentially that's why we created Genie to fill in that gap. So our goal is to empower B2B sales teams to have more customer-centric messaging. We do that through training and coaching sessions, by building sales playbooks, and then building cadences with like email templates, LinkedIn templates, etc. So yeah, that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Nice, man. Well, I think a lot of businesses need that, particularly given there's this increased need to go outbound, given the world we're in at the moment. So I'm sure you're a man in high demand. Alrighty, look, today we're going to be focusing specifically on sales development, and we'll be talking a lot about outbound. I think the burning thing I'd love to know from you really is, what's your perspective on the key metrics you think both sales development reps need to be focusing on, but also their managers? What are the important things that you think we need to get right?
Yeah, it's a good question. I like the part about the managers, because that's not often asked about. I get asked about the SDR stuff all the time. So I think with the reps, in terms of metrics, you can sometimes people are over using productivity and like number of calls, number of emails, number of LinkedIn messages. I don't really care. I only look at that if the number of qualified opportunities or qualified meetings isn't what it's expected to be. If they're way off target, then I'm going to be like, okay, what's going on with the number of calls, the number of LinkedIn messages, the text messages, direct mail, like you guys do? Then I'll look at those specific metrics, but I'm always looking at like the end result, right? So what is an SDR's job? An SDR's job is either to get qualified meetings, or sometimes it's also the opportunity if they're doing that discovery call afterwards. You can also go one step deeper than that. So what we've noticed is a lot of companies, and this is like sales 101, a lot of SDRs at companies, they're going after the wrong people. So getting high volume of opportunities. You may have like 10 opportunities a month is your target, but you could get one opportunity that's worth more than all of those 10 opportunities combined. So we've seen this with a couple of our clients, and something I'm recommending now is actually give SDRs like a pipeline generation. So if the SDRs are responsible for building pipeline, which is essentially what an SDR's job is, you should give them a revenue figure, because that's like what AEs get. AEs get a revenue figure. So why shouldn't you take it a step back and give that responsibility to SDRs? And then I think for the SDR manager themselves, that's the end result, right? So it's essentially the accumulation of all the SDRs together. So if like the SDRs are on target, they're getting a good number of qualified opportunities, or as I said, even more important, they're building enough pipeline for AEs to then close, then the SDR managers essentially doing a good job. And as I say, productivity is important, because sales is about, messaging, which is what we help out with, but it's also a numbers game at the same time. But the numbers and productivity side of it, I only ever look at that. Say we're working with an account, I'm like, okay, they've only got like 3 qualified opportunities this month, a very low average pipeline. I'm going to have a look at how many calls they're doing, and then I may see a problem there. But you shouldn't lead with that. That should almost be like the very last resort.
Very interesting. So, quick question then on the pipeline generated rather than number of opportunities. How do you calculate that? Is it number of opportunities times by average deal size? Because you could be getting some whales in, or you get some smaller ones in.
Yeah, so you just give them a figure, right? You work out like what's what do the AEs need in terms of like closing, right? What's the AE's figure like for the quarter, for the month, for the year, however you guys do it, and then work backwards. What's the close rate of outbound opportunities to close one? And then say like the AE has a figure, if it's like 2 million and your close rate is 10%, then it's going to be like 200,000 essentially pipeline. So yeah, just kind of work backwards from whatever the revenue goal is for the AEs or the closers on your team. I think we use the term AEs because we're in SaaS, but I know a lot of people don't understand AEs, salespeople, whatever you want to call them.
Salespeople, yeah, closers.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, nice. So moving away from an op number and actually a pipeline number. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Now that side of things, we were talking about salespeople there. Where do you see SDRs specifically sitting with an organization? Is it in marketing? Is it in sales? Like, what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those questions gets asked a lot. Naturally, with our company as well, it's because we're mainly helping SDR teams. When we're trying to prospect ourselves, it's like, who do we go after? Do we go after marketing? Do we go after sales? It was the same at CloudTask. And we've actually found it's really a mixture of both. Like sometimes marketing runs the SDR team, sometimes sales. Big one I've seen recently is like demand generation as well. That's a big title, especially at kind of like mid-sized SaaS companies, like 500 to 1,000 employees. You've got this like demand generation department who are taking over the SDRs. So that's what I'm seeing in terms of my opinion. I think having worked with various SDR leaders, the people who are managing the SDR teams or business development teams, it can work well both ways. Like I've seen sales leaders that are very good at it. I've seen marketing leaders that are very good at it. I think where there can be an issue with marketing is if they haven't done sales before. So if they haven't actually cold called, if they haven't been that person, because I think one of the things they don't think about is like we were talking about, sales it's about messaging, but you've also got to reach enough people, and they're not that strategic about it because they haven't done it themselves. So I think for marketing to take it over, it's really important that either they've done it or that they like align with a sales team to understand kind of how it works, because that's often what I see happening. And then even like, we both know Andy Culligan at Leadfeeder, I think he used to manage an SDR team under marketing in his last role, but he used to be an SDR himself. So I think marketing people that understand sales, they can run SDR teams, but I've seen it the other way where it's like someone with like 10 years marketing experience, but all they've ever done is like create content or done SEO, and suddenly they're given the SDR team and they have absolutely no idea what to do. So I think the sales team is naturally more like hungry. There's more of like an outbound mindset generally in sales. So yeah, marketing can own it. I've seen very good SDR teams under marketing, but it's important that they have experience or that they align with the sales team to understand like how an SDR role is.
Yeah, nice. Love it. My preference is give marketers a close one revenue goal, and that solves a lot of the problem itself, rather than let's get some MQLs in. But yeah. I've been challenged on that, and so therefore I'm not going to talk about it too much. Cool. Okay. Right. So it depends on a number of factors then. Now, we're both, well, from the looks of things, I presume this isn't your office as such. We're both still sitting, working in a remote environment. You work with a number of different clients, so you're probably seeing this from a broad range perspective. But what's your main advice right now for helping businesses prospect in a remote environment? So not just they've got reps who are prospecting, you need to manage them, but also how do you actually break through to people?
I actually think remote selling has like democratized sales a bit, because I think before you could get away with not being that good in sales just by being able to meet people in person. Like naturally, if you meet someone and you look them in the eye, you can like build trust a lot more. Like if you and I were to sit in the pub now and like have a few drinks, like we would have a good laugh, right? But I think when you're just doing Zoom calls or you're doing calls, etc., it's you have to be much better with your messaging, because you can't get away with like just, I think you get a lot more personal when you meet people in real life as well. Like I think it's a bit more like professional Zoom. You don't have like a 30-minute conversation about like your dog or cat or I don't know. So I think what a lot of people have said with like selling this year, and like I've been on webinars with you, Alex, where he talks about it, is that you need to be more empathetic. Obviously, you should have been being empathetic before before coronavirus, before the lockdown. That's what sales is about. And I think, with in terms of advice for like prospecting in 2020, 2021 online, use the internet, right? There's so much you can do. I actually think it makes you a lot more productive. So for example, a little tip, I see, before the pandemic, I used to see people like traveling to the office from like 7 to 9 a.m., which is typically like a rush hour. And I would think it's a shame, because if they were at home, like calling people at like 8 a.m., and then it's the same like from like 5 to 6 p.m. or 5 to 7 p.m. when they were going home, those are my two favorite times to get hold of people, especially the more senior you go. Like if you're calling like C-level at bigger companies, if you contact them 9 to 5, even probably with yourself, Alex, they're so busy in their day to day. Whereas if you like email them first thing in the morning or call them at the end of the day, they're not working like in the weeds on their business and they're a bit more relaxed. It's a better time to get them. So I think essentially the point I'm trying to make here is like, we're in a new environment, we're working from home, just make the most of it. So like use it to your advantage, like the fact that you can call someone at like 6 p.m. when before you were traveling, and then like use LinkedIn. Like everyone talks about LinkedIn for messaging. For me, the best thing about LinkedIn is research, because I can do so much research on companies. So if you're doing like an account-based sales approach, go on LinkedIn, look at the company, see if they're growing, see if they're hiring, see if they're using particular technologies. So we're big into like using what we call triggers. So a trigger could be, someone's like, for us, I know if companies are hiring salespeople, they're a great fit because they need help with the training and onboarding of those salespeople. I know if a company's using like outreach or even reach desk or things like this that we have expertise in, they're a great fit. And I can use different tools to get that. So like essentially we're at home. You can't meet someone face to face. You can't like, see someone at an event and build rapport like that. So think about different ways you can build rapport, like using, the technology we all have available to us. Like LinkedIn is free. Yeah, there's paid LinkedIn tools, but free LinkedIn, it gives you a lot of information.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like what you seem to be saying is you can use it to your advantage, particularly with those call times. I know we've seen a lot of success within our SDR team calling like first thing in the morning, particularly if we've got the direct dial data, and actually having a way better hit rate than we did beforehand. You mentioned social there. What particular aspects are you working on with your customers? Is it around sort of the social selling, or are you trying to get a bit more direct using like LinkedIn video, voice notes, those sort of things? Where do you see the most success?
Yeah, I mean, all of it, right? So voice notes, firstly, anyone listening to this, like try out voice notes. They work. I have so many people. Sometimes people don't respond to my voice note, but then they'll reply like a couple of touches later and they'll be like, wow, Michael, I loved your like voice note. I've never seen anyone do that before. I did a poll recently on LinkedIn about like, so this is all kinds of people, all the way from like 5-person companies up to like 5,000-person companies. And I think 93% of them had never received or hadn't received a voice note in the last 2 weeks. So just a way of breaking through the noise. I think unfortunately, because of the pandemic, more and more people are using LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is becoming another channel like email, where like even I get pitched. I'm a very small business. I probably get pitched like 20 times a day on LinkedIn. So you've got to try and break through that noise. And yeah, voice note is a great way to do that. Videos as well are a great way to do that. But of course, your messaging needs to be good. And that's where the research aspect of LinkedIn is really good. Like you could go, like if I was to try and pitch you, Alex, I know that you post a lot of content. So if I go into your content, there's literally so many ways that I could start a conversation. Like I could be, oh, Alex, noticed I actually listened to your podcast with the founder of Growth, Genie, Michael, where he was talking about LinkedIn voice notes. So here's me doing a LinkedIn voice note, right? So like you can just be quite spontaneous with that. So yeah, use LinkedIn for research and then use a voice note or like a video to stand out from the crowd.
Why, you mentioned, what was it, 93%? Why are businesses not adopting it?
I don't know. That is the $1 million question. But I think it's a relatively new function. I think it's been around like less than a year. I think a lot of people don't even really know about it. That's the feedback I get. Like when I get on these calls and they're like, I loved your voice note, didn't know about it. People are asking me how you do it. So if you've never done a LinkedIn voice note, unfortunately you have to have the mobile app. You can't do it on desktop, which I don't like because I don't like having work apps on my phone for like mental health reasons. So you're not working all the time. But yeah, I think a lot of people just don't know. And then I think there's also fear because especially like in our culture, like British culture, right, there's always this thing about, oh, you're going to sound cringe essentially. But what a voice note does, it makes you be more human. And that's why like calling still works. There's all these debates about like, oh, should you still be cold calling? And yeah, you should, because it enables you to be more human, because a voice is human, right? So it's the same with a voice note or a video. Like, don't just be text, like show your face. And people buy from people. Even when I've bought software in the past, a lot of software that I bought, I'm like, should I choose this or should I choose that? But I got on really well with the sales rep at one company, so I ended up going for that software. So
Nice, man. So what's the key to getting voice notes right? Because I've received quite a few. Some of them are really good, some of them are rubbish. I'm not going to dissect what I think. How do you have like a template for teaching it, or what do you think good looks like within a voice note, or maybe even video?
yeah, I always think don't overcomplicate things. So the good thing about LinkedIn, it only lets you do a minute voice note anyway. It cuts you off after that. And then I'd say the same for like video. You want it to be like probably under a minute, but like maximum like under 90 seconds. And don't go overboard. So like there's a big thing about personalization. You'll see it's big debate like on LinkedIn, and that's our clients ask us a lot, like what's the balance between personalization and automation? That's a big debate at the moment. But all you need is like one little line of personalization, right? So even if it was like, hey, Michael, saw your webinar with Leadfeeder on prospecting, or saw your podcast with Andy about like LinkedIn voice notes. And then you need another line that's kind of like building into that, but like through a pane. So you're essentially tying a business pane into that. So, oh, notice you're using LinkedIn voice notes. One of the issues with LinkedIn voice notes is that you can't actually track who's clicking on them, etc. Like, would you be interested in a way that you can do that? So again, it's essentially line of personalization, line of a pane, a business pane, and then a CTA. And a good note for the CTA as well, and this is whether you're doing an email, a call, or anything. Gong, who some of you may know is basically a call recording software. They did a big study like analyzing millions of emails, and they said an interest CTA versus like a call CTA. So would you be interested in learning more versus do you want to get on a 15-minute call to discuss, gets twice as many meetings? I would actually say from our own outreach and like with our clients, I actually think it's more than that. So try and like get someone's interest before you actually pick the call. And once they say, yes, I'm interested, then it's very easy to get that call.
Nice. Very, very cool, man. Is there a way of seeing who's clicking on LinkedIn voice notes? Are there tools out there?
There's not. So if anyone knows that, they can pitch me. But I think there's LinkedIn doesn't have like an open API, so it's that's another big issue we see with our clients, like tracking LinkedIn metrics. That's another conversation for another time.
Well, I think there's I've heard on the grapevine that on the walls of LinkedIn offices, not that anyone's in them at the moment, I think it says something like, we don't want to be the Instagram of B2B, or something along those lines. So they're keeping everything behind locked doors, which does make things harder, but I know it could be an opportunity too. Nice. So we've spoken about a couple of opportunities there. What other channels do you think are underutilized, particularly by SDRs?
Yeah, we were talking about this before, and you mentioned a couple that I definitely say, which is like SMS and WhatsApp. You have to be careful due to like different legal regulations when it comes to SMS, because there was a lot of talk about GDPR at the start. But I think for B2B, like sending like cold business emails, at least in the UK, I know it's different in Germany, it's actually been okay. But the thing is, a phone is often like a personal number, so you can cross the line sometimes over GDPR. But if you're getting like inbound leads, if you're getting people that have literally gone on your website, giving you their number, like text them, the average open rate for an SMS, a cold SMS, is 90%. Versus the average open rate for a cold email is 20%. And even if I look at myself, like I literally open every single text message I get, every single WhatsApp I get. I very rarely open like cold emails unless they have brilliant subject lines. Whereas a few people have SMS me and pitch me stuff. Unfortunately, it's normally been rubbish, but I've always opened them. And even then I've been like, it's great that people are using SMS for sales. But I think probably in 10 years that may change, where like everyone's starting to use it. But at the moment, yeah, like SMS, and then if you're in Europe or basically outside of North America, WhatsApp as well. And there's this stigma that's like, oh yeah, I can't use it because it's a personal number. And I think actually it sounds bad, but that's the reason you should use it, because no one else is using it. So you can stand out from the crowd. It's like what I was talking about, voice notes and videos. And again, your messaging needs to be on point, and it needs to be very short, because imagine like a text, even when you send your mates text, you don't send huge paragraphs. to send them like a 1 or 2 sentence text about like a business pain or like a bit of personalization, like we talked about earlier. But yeah, SMS can be super effective.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Nice, man. All right. Well, I think there are several areas of, we could talk about prospecting and sales development for hours and hours upon end. In fact, we have done in the past. Is there anything else that you're particularly passionate about when it comes to sales or sales development that you just generally like to share?
Yeah, I think work on your mindset more than anything. I think the ego is the main thing that kills salespeople because they're getting worried about rejection, essentially. So like the better you become, sales is about, having good messaging, like we talked about, but it's also about embracing rejection. And also your message, the two are actually linked because your messaging will get better. The more you try sell, the more you do cold calls, the more you learn. Like I'm still learning all the time. I look back at things I was doing 3 years ago and put my head in my hands, and I'm sure it'll be the same in 3 years later. So I think don't be worried about making mistakes. And I think salespeople sometimes they're afraid of rejection. They're afraid of picking up the phone because they think the other person's going to say no. And I think every no that you get gets you closer to a yes. That's the thing. Actually, my colleague, Lawrence Jackman says. So I think, and if I look back, so this is good advice for young salespeople as well. I think if I look back on my early days in sales, I was a bit like that. I was a bit scared of picking up the phone. I'm only 31 as well. So I was like, when I started in sales, like emails were around, LinkedIn was just coming up. So I'm not from an era where like cold calling was the norm. So I was like, oh, I don't know about calling. It scared me. And then the more I did it, I was like, wow, this is so much better because I can actually have it's like a two-way conversation. It's not like an email. So also do things that you're frightened of and often try things out and you have success. And work on your mind. The more you can leave your ego aside and not be scared of rejection, the better you'll get at sales.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to something that we've discussed in the past, which is I think a lot of people read, particularly in sales, read a lot of sales books. We read a lot about like the methodology, and quite a few of these are quite antiquated. They might have been invented 50 years ago, might have expired to some extent. So from my understanding, you read quite a lot on this, right? Your go-to is a book on mindset. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So we were talking about this before because a bit controversial, right? And some people won't like me for saying this, but I never read sales books. I probably read like a couple of sales books in my life. One was actually Daniel Disney's £1 Million LinkedIn Message, only because he was kind enough to send it to me. So I started reading it on the toilet. But generally I read stuff about like consciousness and breathing and more just stuff about the bigger picture of life because sales is my business life, but there's a bigger world out there. And thing that essentially helps me strengthen my mind. And things about, like ego, essentially, that like ego keeps you down on earth, but there's like a bigger world out there, essentially, and being more connected to consciousness. And, I'm getting a bit deep and philosophical here, but I think all of us are connected to each other. We're all part of each other's consciousness. So when you realize that, you get much better at sales and you strengthen your mind and you have more positive outset. So if you want a recommendation of a book that really like transformed my life, it's by a guy called Stanislav Grof, and it's called The Cosmic Game: Human Frontiers of Consciousness. And it really takes your mind out there and look at the bigger picture. So
very cool, man. I did not expect to be talking to you about consciousness, but it's so important. And what I've been through really tough times in sales myself. I did start just by dialing, so the phone was always my best friend. When it didn't work, I didn't really have anything else to fall back on. The stress levels go through the roof, your targets start slipping. And actually it was a mindset shift for me that really helped me get through the tough times and find new channels. So I think mindset should be the first thing really that we address, particularly when taking new people on. So I love that, man, and I love you going deep into it, which is very cool. All right, look, we're nearly up for time, Michael. I always ask this because I feel like it's very easy to keep going about what you could do, but let's focus on SDRs or SDR leaders. If you could tell them to stop doing something right now, what would it be? What are the things that you're thinking like everyone needs to just stop doing this?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because there was a lot of things that I could say here that like everyone is talking about essentially. So one thing I'm going to say is actually like going in too hard like on the first email. So like essentially like asking for a meeting on the first email. I think people are catching on to this more and more now, but essentially the way I think about it is whenever we start a campaign, and we were talking about marketing and sales, I always involve marketing, like when we're onboarding a client, because I say, what is the one bit of content you have that's like super valuable to your customers? Like, what's your most downloaded bit of content? And like, how does it help your customers essentially? And then like create interest in that. So like a lot of the ways we build pipeline is I like reach out to people and we basically have a playbook template, which is actually what we build for clients. And I'll be like, hey, Alex, notice you're hiring SDRs over at Reach Desk. We actually have a playbook template that you can use to onboard them. Would you be interested in seeing it? And then they're like, yes, you can send over a copy, and then you've started a conversation. It's much easier rather than saying, hey, we're like brilliant sales consultants and trainers. Like, do you want to get us involved? So always think about that. Like, think about what's something you can just give away to someone that's super valuable to them to start a conversation. So yeah, that would be my thing not to do, is like to pitch straight away, which is standard. People say that a lot, but even you can write a good message and still ask for a meeting. So think about how can I create interest in something that's very valuable to them.
Love that, man. I think it's a really, really valuable lesson. I've been guilty of it myself. I get prospected all the time. I'm not here to bash people, but it does get overlooked pretty quickly because people have targets to hit, and what they want to do is they want to ask real quick. So I think it's really good advice. Okay, look, the final thing I'd love to ask you is that what's the best thing you've ever been sent in the post?
Well, actually, going back to your last question, as I'm here, and generally, I think a good channel is direct mail for sure. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on the podcast. I think.
But thank you for saying anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a way of breaking through the noise, or like vouchers. I was also of the mindset that you could only do it like for deals you had in the pipeline or for customer success. That's what we did at CloudTask. But I'm also seeing some of our clients are doing it like cold, and it's working for them. So that's a good thing. And then in terms of what I've been sent, probably so I went, one of my oldest friends in London is an Indian guy, he's Indian British, and he had an Indian wedding, and he sent us basically this like amazing like wedding invitation, but you like pulled it out and it was like 3D and with like saris and stuff. And then he actually sent us like our outfit as well. So he like paid for the outfits and like sent us the outfit, because basically the friends of the groom have to do a dance. I've forgotten the name now, but on the first night of the wedding, because Indian weddings are like 4 days. So yeah, it was a great wedding because of it. But I also remember like receiving it and I was like, okay, this is going to be a serious wedding. So.
Very cool. Well, look, I cannot promise to be sending you anything of that caliber, and we're certainly not going to be doing a dance together anytime soon. Maybe next year. But I will be sending you something from Reach Desk. Thank you for your time here, mate. But Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining me on the Desk Drop, and hopefully we will be able to sit in a pub at some point soon and enjoy a beer, and we can catch up over that means.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks a lot for inviting me on, Alex.
No worries, man. Cheers, man. Speak to you in a bit.
Cheers.